Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's art advice video, I'm going to give you 5 tips on how you can self-critique. So self-critique is really important to help you grow as an artist, and a lot of people struggle with how to do it. So I'm just going to run through 5 tips of things that I do myself to help me analyze what isn't working and what is working within an art piece. So my first tip is to view your work as an outsider. So imagine that you are someone that is a complete stranger that hasn't seen your work before, and perhaps your work is hanging in a gallery or on exhibition or something like that, and you're a complete stranger just viewing your work for the first time. So you need to look at what areas you would compliment and what areas you don't like. So analyze each and every single part of your artwork, go through inch by inch and see which areas you like and which areas you don't like. And when you're looking at those areas that you don't like, try and understand why you don't like them. So perhaps you have added like too many layers of pencil or paint or anything. Perhaps you don't particularly like that you've created some sort of effect there. Maybe there's wax bloom if you're using coloured pencils. Try and analyse what it is that is wrong with each part that you don't like. And the same with what parts you do like. Try and understand what it is that you like about those. Maybe it's the way that you blended. Maybe it's the fact that you use a certain like splatter technique if you're painting or anything like that. So try and analyse what areas you do and which areas you don't like within your own piece. And try to be really subjective about it. So try not to be too nice on yourself, but also try not to be too hard on yourself either. So try not to preserve your own feelings about it. Try and be really super honest about it with yourself, and that's really going to help you to understand where you need to improve and where you can grow. My second tip for you is to compare your newer work against your older pieces. So have a look at your body of work as a whole. So something that you've created, say today, look at something that you created last week, and also look at something that you created a year ago, and see if your work is consistent and see if you have actually improved. So when you're looking at something from a year ago, you're going to want to see that you have improved and that you've learned how to use a particular technique or evolved your techniques to create a more sort of realistic or whatever kind of style you're going for. So try and see if you can see an improvement in your work. And if you can't see an improvement, is that work consistent? So is your body of work consistently good? Are there pieces that are worse than others, or are there pieces that are better than others? And look at that body of work in a whole and analyze it as a whole together. You are more likely to improve by comparing your work against your own work than you are by comparing your artwork to another artist. So you always want to make sure that you compare your work against your own, and that's what's going to help you to really grow. There's no point comparing your artwork to an artist that is of a higher standard, because you're never going to be happy with your work. So make sure that you compare your work against older existing works and see if there's that improvement and see if you have grown and evolved as an artist. It's also a good practice to look back at your old work as well, because there might have been a few techniques in your older work that you've sort of lost along in your art journey, and perhaps you want to reintroduce them to your work to give it another dimension and level. So it's really important to look back at that old work and see if there are any techniques which you can reapply to your work today. My third tip is something that I do every single day with every single piece of artwork, and that is to turn it upside down or use a mirror to give it a reverse reflection. When you do that, it tricks your brain into seeing it in a different perspective, and it's easier to identify mistakes. So you're used to seeing a piece of artwork up a certain way, but when you flip it on its reverse, your brain suddenly sees all of the mistakes and sees if it is correct. So good practice is to every now and then, whilst you're working on a piece, to turn it upside down if you haven't taped it to your desk, and just to see if it is working. So when it's upside down, it's easier to see if your tones are correct, if your proportions are correct, and if it just generally looks good. If you have something taped down to your desk, then it's a good practice to use a mirror, and then you can see that reverse reflection where it's sort of upside down in the mirror, and then you can identify if there are any mistakes or anything that's kind of working within the piece that way. And it's really important to do that every so often through your piece of work. Now, I don't necessarily use a mirror, and I don't necessarily always turn my work upside down, but I'm constantly recording every single piece that I make, and all I need to do is just flip the image on my camera and I can look up and I can see if it's working, and that's the way that I kind of analyze everything. So I can see if there are certain tones which need to be added in certain areas, if anything needs to be made darker, anything needs to be made lighter. I can analyze that on my camera screen, so I actually use my camera instead of a mirror. But it's a really, really helpful tip, and it's one that is crucial to self-critique, and it really does help you identify where you're going wrong with a piece during that piece rather than analysing it after you finished. So to kind of go along with that tip number 4 is to look at your work with fresh eyes. And that one's really important because sometimes your eyes can get used to the same image and don't necessarily identify the mistakes that you're making. So it's really important to take breaks every so often, even if it's a break for like a week or a month, and come back to your work with fresh eyes and really analyse it. So I like to do that when I've completely finished a piece. I like to finish it to the standard where at that precise time I'm feeling that it's good, and then I revisit it in 3 to 5 days and I look at it with critical eyes and see if there are any adjustments which need making. And I can also apply the previous tips there, so I can turn my work upside down or use a mirror to just identify if there's mistakes or what's working. I can then compare against my older pieces so I can see if there's an improvement, if there's a dramatic jump in the quality of the work or anything like that, and then I can also just analyse it as an outsider, what is and what isn't working, by just following the rest of those tips. So it's really important to freshen your eyes, freshen your perspective on your work. That makes all the difference as well. The last tip is to keep a record whilst you're creating a piece of work of what you found hard or what you found easy to do. So you can make a record of things that you found hard, and then you can grow on that for future pieces by practicing and experimenting with those areas that you found more difficult. So I'm going to use animals as an example here. A lot of people find ears and noses really difficult to do. So if you find that really difficult in your current piece, you can write down and keep a log of what exactly you found difficult to do. Perhaps it was the shading, perhaps it was creating a realistic highlight or anything like that. You can write down those and you can practice and work on those in between your pieces and try to use different techniques and finding different ways to do things within your next piece. And that's going to really help you, and it's going to help that experimentation aspect of art, and it's just going to help you grow as an artist as well. It's also important to write down the things that you found easy, because when you're working on future pieces, you can reference that easy part and you can work and experiment on different techniques to maybe even improve your workflow and make things even easier. So in a previous piece, you may have found something really easy and the method that you used, but if you're working on that new piece and working on that area that you found really, really easy in previous pieces, you can experiment with different techniques and a different way of doing things to see if you can make life even easier for yourself and see if that same aspect is easier and as easy in your new piece as well, if that makes sense. So all of these tips are really crucial to self-critique yourself and to help you grow as an artist, and it is really important to actually do these things during and after you finish a piece of work. Again, as I keep saying, to help you grow and help you evolve as an artist. Now, you may not want to self-critique every single piece, and you might find self-critique a really daunting thing to do because you might not want to be that harsh on yourself, but it is really important and it is something that every artist should be doing. So I just want to quickly talk about the koala painting which is going on in the background here. This is something that I had to self-critique myself. Whilst I was painting this, I was thinking that I was going to just do a pure watercolour method and just slowly building layers, but as I was going through this process, I kept stopping and waiting for things to dry and then coming back to it with those fresh eyes like I mentioned in one of the self-critique tips, and I kept noticing things that I really didn't like, and I kept trying to play around with it with just the pure watercolour, and things just weren't working for me. So I sort of thought to myself, what don't I like and what do I like? And I decided that I needed needed to go in there with some fine liner and also some white gel pen as well to bring out a few areas. So by using my sort of self-critique process, I was able to bring this little koala painting to a point where I was semi-happy with it. I'm still not entirely happy with it, and I might work over again with a little bit of coloured pencil, but I'm going to leave it a couple days and then come back to it and see how I feel about it. So I would love to hear your comments and thoughts of areas that you like about this painting or where you think I could improve on this painting. So post your thoughts about this in the comments below. So hopefully these 5 short tips on self-critique have helped you and you can apply these to your work when you're working on a new piece. And if you have any other tips on how to self-critique or anything that you do during your artistic process, then let me know in the comments below, because I'm always interested to see how you guys sort of go about your creative process. If you like this video, then make sure you give it a thumbs up, and if you're new around here and you want to hear more art advice and inspirational topics like this, then make sure that you hit that subscribe button and tick that bell icon to be notified of all of my future videos. I also release art tutorial videos every single Friday. But anyway guys, that's it for today, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!